Good evening, everyone. My name's Caleb Schaefer, and I know a lot of folks and recognize a lot of names. I am I've been away for a little bit. Folks may have noticed I had stepped away to help support a management role on a detail that the Superfund division needed, and that was just for 4 months. And I am back now, so I am back in the role of Portland Harbor team lead, and look forward to continuing to work with you all. It's really good to see a lot of familiar names, familiar faces. That's really kind of the big staffing update, which is kind of the first thing we typically cover in terms of our EPA updates. The other thing we often initially share right off the bat is just our latest fact sheet. And so if folks aren't familiar, every quarter we do a fact sheet that gives an overview of the site and all the different areas that are in remedial design that are moving towards cleanup. And we have an updated fact sheet that we will share. We will put a link in the chat so folks can use that. It's a helpful tool. One, it kind of really helps you see, when you say something like Willamette Cove, if you're not familiar where it is, you can see it where it is on the map, kind of who the point of contact is, where it's at in the stage of design, because all of these different areas, all these circles you see on the map are moving forward in design. So it kind of gives a good snapshot and an overview and is a very useful reference tool. So encourage folks, if you haven't seen it, to take a look at it. And if you are familiar with it, there's an update. Other things we'd like to make sure and provide in terms of updates this evening are our consent decree negotiations. So many folks know we are completing this design work, essentially the blueprints for the physical cleanup that will occur. And we call that cleanup remedial action. We have agreements in place that EPA is overseeing that design work. Those agreements last the duration of design. And when EPA at any Superfund site moves to the cleanup phase, we negotiate a new agreement. And typically that agreement is a consent decree. So that is a judicial instrument that is lodged with the court. EPA works closely with Department of Justice, who negotiates that consent decree. And we have been in active negotiations developing what will be the framework for the cleanup. Things continue to move, progress continues to be made. We have shared historically that our goal is to have those consent decree negotiations complete by early 2027. That continues to be our goal. It is a very ambitious goal, but there is a lot of time and effort on behalf of this team and the Department of Justice to really work to meet that goal. The actual cleanup, the plan is, as we've always said, when we sign the consent decree in early 2027, is that it takes some time for contractors to get on board, to plans to be finalized, to actually get out in the water. So the actual physical cleanup and dredging, and when we'd actually see boats in the water, would occur in 2028, given just mobilization requirements and fish window requirements. So we would likely actually physically start that cleanup in 2028. So that's the update as we continue our consent decrees. I just acknowledge too that Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is also a signatory to that consent decree, so that they're actively engaged in these negotiations as well. Another follow-up item EPA has to share this evening is our material transportation and disposal mural. So this is something that we did in 2025, and I was actually here for this, so recall it well. Some of you that participated in that meeting may recall that we went through an exercise after we did a presentation on transportation and disposal, getting feedback from folks. We continue to work to incorporate that feedback in terms of something that is summarized. We really appreciate all the feedback that we did get. We got a lot of it. We got a lot of good feedback, and it really helped to have you all, many of you here that contributed to that. We plan to actually share an actual list of that feedback before the next collaborative meeting. So we plan to kind of finalize the organization and review, but wanted to make sure and just touch upon the main pieces of feedback that we heard that are important for EPA to consider as we continue to review these design documents in the realm of transportation and disposal. And there were really five overarching areas that we heard. One was transportation safety and infrastructure capacity concerns in terms of disposal locations. Second, a commonality we heard in theme was just public health, air quality, and the risks associated with contamination, both hazardous and non-hazardous waste that will be disposed of from the site. The third theme that we heard was community engagement and transparency, and the emphasis and importance surrounding that as the site progresses and decisions are made surrounding transportation and disposal. The fourth theme that we heard was environmental and operational vulnerability of disposal sites. So we certainly heard feedback from communities here, communities elsewhere about impacts associated with specific disposal sites if waste were to go there. And finally, a theme that we heard from it was economic, regional, and kind of logistical impacts. So a lot of really good and a lot of meaty topics for us to really consider, continue to talk through, and for EPA to factor into our own reviews as we continue developing these designs and finalizing them. So again, thank you for all that feedback, and look forward to sharing something comprehensive on this before the next collaborative. The third body of work that I wanted to update folks on that we continue to work on is the Community Impacts Mitigation Plan. And I do have really good news here. It is undergoing final EPA review, and we expect to have it released this month. So I know that was a significant effort from a lot of folks, and we do really appreciate the input that we received on that document. And again, for folks that may not be familiar with this document, the Community Impacts Mitigation Plan is something that would be attached to our consent decree, and it would identify impacts as a result of the cleanup that we feel is important, along with the input that we receive from others, that is addressed during cleanup. Things like light pollution, noise pollution, those types of things. So again, appreciate all the valuable feedback we received on that, and look forward to sending an updated version of that later this month. Those are the updates I have for Portland Harbor. I did want to also just take the opportunity to provide one update on McCormick and Baxter. As many folks know, we have a prospective purchaser agreement that EPA is working on with Portland Botanical Gardens. And so wanted to just give you two quick updates about that site and reuse and redevelopment of that site. So the update on the prospective purchaser agreement is that Portland Botanical Gardens has, as many folks know, they request a prospective purchaser agreement, or a PPA, and negotiate that with the state DEQ. They have also requested a prospective purchaser agreement from EPA, and that's not uncommon because we both have a role at this site. But that would be a separate PPA, and that would be separate from the DEQ process. And so EPA's prospective purchaser agreement, since our role has been limited relatively compared to the state of Oregon's role, who played a much more significant role in terms of the duration of that cleanup and implementation of it. Our PPA with the Botanical Gardens would essentially be a payment-only agreement. EPA has associated costs with the work that we've done there, And a result of settling those costs will be through this prospective purchaser agreement. So it'll be a much more simple agreement than the DEQ agreement, and folks that perhaps saw that because that included additional work. But there will be a process for that, so folks will see that process. That we will be accepting public comments on that PPA. So we have a public comment period, just like DEQ had, and we will make sure to update folks when that public comment period starts. We'll make sure to disseminate information and be available if folks have questions about that. Also, and the last thing I had to share, this is also related to McCormick and Baxter, is that we at all of our Superfund sites where waste is left in place, EPA is statutorily required to every 5 years to look at that site, do a comprehensive review to determine whether or not the cleanup continues to be protective of people in the environment. At these sites, we're doing regular operation and maintenance. We are very involved, but we have to do this more formal review every 5 years. And we are doing that for the McCormick and Baxter site this year. We are coordinating closely with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. That 5-year review is being prepared as well for that site. That will be looking at that site, and that will be available. Part of the process is getting any sort of input. So if you have input or thoughts on McCormick and Baxter, if you have information specifically about how the remedy is working, for example, we would look at things like, has the cap there been damaged in any way? Have vessels impacted it? Have you seen any issues associated with signage at the site, access being controlled at the site? Have you seen any issues with fencing? Those are all the things we want to look at to ensure that the remedy that was constructed there, the cleanup, remains in place and continues to be protective. So if you do have any information or want to provide input on this process that agencies should consider as they review this remedy, EPA and DEQ wants to hear from you. And the remedial project manager for that site is Annie Christopher, as many know, and for EPA, and for DEQ, it's Sarah Miller. And so we are hoping to hear by June 26th, if you do want to provide input or have any comments you'd like to provide on McCormick and Baxter, to either Annie Christopher, the EPA project manager, or Sarah Miller, and we will put their contact information in the chat. So that concludes the updates I have for EPA.